Lesson 3.1, Solving Quadratic Equations. How do you solve a quadratic equation by graphing and algebraically? We're now going to look at solving quadratics by square roots. A quadratic equation, when it is in the sum of a value x squared plus some kind of number with no variable next to it equals 0, this means that you could actually solve by square roots. And solving by the square root property, you would want to get the x squared by itself. And when you do get the x squared by itself, you're going to square root each side. And your answer is going to be x equals the plus or the minus of whatever that number square rooted is. So let's take a look and see how did we come up with that. What does that mean? So solve each equation using square roots. I see an x squared minus 64 equals 0. I need to get the x squared by itself. You get the x squared by itself by adding 64 to each side. So I have x squared equaling a 64. I have the x squared by itself, but I want the x. So if you want to get rid of the exponent, you're going to take the square root of each side. The square root and the second power cancel each other out. I have x equaling, what is the square root of 64? It is plus or minus 8. Now why is it plus or minus 8 when the previous time we had no plus or minus? This is asking you, what two numbers multiply to give me 64? I know that 8 times 8 would give me 64. I also know that negative 8 times negative 8 equals 64. When I am choosing to take the square root of a value, you have to remember both positives and negatives. If the square root is already written here in the original problem, they are implying only the positive values. If I wrote the square root there, then you need to make sure that you take into account positive and negative. So let's go ahead and solve problem number 2. 7x squared plus 8 equals 15. I need to move the 8 so I can get the x squared part by itself. So I have 7x squared equaling 7. I need the x squared by itself, so I'm going to divide both sides by 7. So I have x squared equaling 1. I need the exponent to go away. So I'm going to square root each side. The square root and the second power cancel each other out. I have x. I chose to take the square root. Since I chose to, I need the plus or minus. The square root of 1 is 1. So my answer is x equals plus or minus 1. Let's go ahead and do problem number 3. I need to solve for x. So I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides. I have 81x squared equaling 16. I need to get the x squared by itself, so I need to divide both sides by the 81. So I have x squared equaling a 16 over 81. I want the x, not an x squared. So I am choosing to square root each side. The square root and the exponent cancel each other out. I have just x. I chose to take the square root. If I chose to take the square root, you need plus or minus. It is a fraction, so here is my fraction. You are square rooting the entire fraction. So the square root of the numerator, the square root of 16, was 4. The square root of the denominator, the square root of 81, was 9. So my answer is x equals plus or minus 9. Problem number 6. I need to get the x squared by itself. So I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides. So I have 9x squared equaling 108. I need the x squared by itself. So I'm going to divide both sides by 9. So x squared is going to give me 12. I don't want x squared, I want x. So I'm choosing to take the square root of both sides. The square root and the exponent of a 2 cancel each other out. I have x. If I chose to take the square root, then I need plus or minus. I do not know the square root of 12, which means that I need to break it up like we did in the previous problems. Prime factorizing 12, I get 2 times 2 times 3. The root outside there was a 2, which means I was doing pairs. Here is a pair of 2's that 3 does not pair. So x equals plus or minus. The 2's escaped, the poor 3 did not. So my answer is plus or minus 2 root 3. There are 5 problems left on the page. Please complete these for independent practice.